The first thing I'm going to do is welcome you to the podcast, my friend. How are you? Or better yet, how's she cutting?
Things are very good.
We have a lot of similarities between us.
Yeah, okay.
Both of us are born in October. You were in the 17th, mine's the 19th, so happy belated.
I think you might be on Greg Malone's birthday.
Oh, good.
I think so, yeah.
And the other thing we both have in common is we're both from St. John's, Newfoundland.
Yes, we are.
And we both like to rent. Of course, I don't get paid to rent, though, but you do.
Well, dare to dream, my friend, dare to dream. I didn't always get paid to rent.
Let's start way back in 1990. So even before I was born, you rose to fame with your one-man show. Then 2 years later, you created another one-man show, which eventually brought you into creating This Hour is 22 Minutes. Take me through those early years.
Well, I started out in a comedy troupe. It was called Corey Wade's Playhouse. We were in St. John's. There was 4 of us. And I was always interested in politics. And inside that troupe, I used to do a kind of some single stuff, solo stuff. And the plan was we were going to wait till everyone was out of high school. I was a year older, so I had to hang around. And then we were going to do some comedy shows. Then we were going to go to Toronto and become famous like Kids in the Hall or Codco. That was the plan. It didn't really work out because some of the members got a big job touring Newfoundland, and the group was kind of split up. And at the same time, there was a fellow in town, Gerald Lunds, who was down working with Codco. And the National Arts Centre in Ottawa asked him to bring in a one-person show. And Kathy Jones from This Hour's 22 Minutes had a one-woman show at the time, and it was taking the country by storm. And the National Arts Centre kind of thought, geez, I bet everyone in Newfoundland has a one-person show. So they asked Gerald to find one and bring it in. And he went around and he asked a bunch of people, and they all said no. And then he asked me, and at the time I was ranting about the Meech Lake Accord of all things. And he said, you want to go to Ottawa and rant about it up there? And I said, yes. And I was so young, I didn't know any better because I didn't know anything about doing a one-man show. But off we went to Ottawa, and we did the show. And, it's a bit of a long story, but through a series of unforeseen circumstances, the show became a big hit, and it immediately toured the country. And I ended up doing it probably 120, 130 times, and it got the attention of the CBC, and it eventually led to me being on 22 Minutes. I mean, that's a short version.
You spent a long time at 22 Minutes. It was here you developed your rants, which you brought to the Rick Mercer Report. How did you come up with the idea, and what goes through your mind during that process?
Well, when 22 started, there was only going to be 6 episodes, and it could have been so many different things. There were 4 people, and we had to create this show. And then there was a creative producer, and Gerald Lunds, and there was a news producer, and there was, CBC producer, and there was, the people who own the show. There was a lot of different voices in the room about creating the show that there was only going to be 6 episodes. And there were some great ideas, and there were some terrible ideas. And there were some ideas that were improbable, and there were times. It was such an intense creative process, but there was times where I thought, oh my God, this show is going off the rails. And I kind of sensed it was either going to be a huge, huge success or a colossal disaster. And sometimes creative endeavors that are worth doing, that's the two options. So kind of as in a sense of self-protection, I thought, I'll do a rant. And then if it all goes south, at least at the end of the day, I'll be able to say, well, look, I had this rant, and when I do a new show or when I go pitch the next show, I'll say, this is what I want to bring to the table. And I managed to squeeze it in there also because it was so cheap. It's still the cheapest 2 minutes in television today. I mean, anyone has an idea that involves television, you go, okay, it's 1 or 2 or 3 actors, and then we need costumes, and then we need cameras, and we need lights, and we need all these things cost money, whereas the rant was just me and a cameraman wandering around down by the docks. So it was very, very affordable, so they let it happen, and it worked, and then the rants were in every single episode of 22 Minutes as long as I was there.
And I want to ask you this because I enjoyed the rants, but do you prefer like the kind of graffiti background, or is it just anywhere that you can walk around freely?
Well, since I started doing this show, they're always in the graffiti alley. And originally, so many things in TV, there's a super practical reason. I shoot the rants on Friday, and my studio is in Toronto and perform in front of the studio audience on Friday. So I can't go far. Any other time of the week, I'm all over the country, but on Friday I can't go far. So the Rant Alley is just up the street from the CBC studios, and over the years it's grown and grown, so now it's a series of alleys, and it's a perfect location. I mean, they're beautifully painted, and they change on a fairly regular basis, and it's up the street. So yeah, it's just a that's what I like to do. It's an iconic image now, the Rant Alley, and I'm glad that I played a small part in that.
You also had a segment, talking to Americans. What was the purpose behind that, and did things ever get heated over the segment?
The purpose behind that was, it was probably my second or third trip to the United States. At the time, 22 Minutes was very famous for ambushing politicians, and I felt I was pretty good at ambushing politicians, and I was making a name for myself. And Mary Walsh was ambushing politicians, and she was doing very well. So we were very competitive. And then one day, Walsh put on the Marg Princess Warrior. She would always ambush politicians as Marg, but then she put on the Marg Princess Warrior outfit, and she took it to a whole new level. And I remember looking at it and going, well, I might as well stop ambushing politicians because she's just nailed it, And so I decided to go to the States, and I went down there, and I did some stuff that was kind of funny. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People were getting a kick out of seeing me in Washington. But then the second or third trip, everything I tried failed, and I was kind of desperate, and I knew if I came back with nothing, I'd never get a chance to go back again. And I just started talking to people and making stuff up, and I started making stuff up about a summit between the President of the United States and the President of Canada. And I said it was called our President is called President Ralph Ben-Mergy. Do you think our summit should be called the Ben-Mergy Clinton Summit or the Clinton Ben-Mergy Summit? And people started coming up with all of these opinions, and some people started talking about Prime Minister Ben-Mergy or President Ben-Mergy of Canada, and we cut it together and made the first episode of Talking to Americans, and people went crazy, and then I did that for the next 5 years.
I read at one time that, just going through a little bit of history, that, George Bush got a little bit pissy and Al Gore got a little bit confused when you called it, coming to Canada's capital of Toronto.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a story around the CBC, and I've never, ever had it confirmed, but I've been told it a number of times, that when George W. Bush became President of the United States, the CBC reached out for an interview, and every sitting president had always done interviews with CBC, and they turned down the CBC flat, and then they said there will never be an interview between the President of the United States for CBC News, because you're the people who did the poutine thing. And they had to say, no, that wasn't CBC News. That was a comedy show. But of course, internationally, people think of CBC. They think of CBC News. And so I've been told numerous times that George Bush held a grudge against CBC for, 2 presidencies because of me. But no one at the CBC ever complained about it. They just chuckled about it. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's all in light fun. It's all a little bit of humor. And
I could see another network maybe not finding that quite so funny, but the CBC, they were pretty good.
Now, of course, your time came to a close in 2001 where you left the show. Was it just time? And, what was the reason really behind that?
The similarities between what I'm kind of going through now, I guess, are fairly strong, I guess, because when I left that show, I felt like I was leaving the best show in Canada and the best job in Canada, and that's the way I feel now. But I think the reason why I left, well, I know the reason why I left. There was never any bad blood or anything like that, and it was a great job, and I could do pretty much whatever I wanted, and I liked working with the people that I wanted. But as time went on, it was about 8 years in, I had started working on another sitcom called Made in Canada, and I was producing that show. And I had come to realize that television is a producer's medium, and the producer, at the end of the day, gets to make the decision. And I wanted to be the producer. So I was no different than, a cook in a restaurant who decides, I want to own my own restaurant. And I just wanted my own show. And doesn't matter how popular you are, if it's someone else's show, someone else owns the show. In TV, they own the show. They get to call the shots. I just wanted my own show. So there was no bad blood. It was just I wanted my own restaurant. And that's what led to the Mercer Report.
No, I agree with that answer. I mean, I've read somewhere online that said that you and Mary Walsh had a falling out, but I mean, you just gave her credit for making both of you good comedians. So I was like, no, that's completely
and
wrong.
Mary and I mean, of course, people said we had a falling out because we probably had 200. Especially when we were creating the show. I mean, Mary and I were very different creative forces, and my God, we had some great battles. Never really personal stuff, but we would get in arguments about stuff all the time. But no. I mean, there was no scenario ever where I left the show because I had a falling out. And we weren't like that. Because, see, 22 Minutes, our strength was we were 4 individual people. We weren't the Beatles. You couldn't break us up because we weren't together. We were 4 people who worked together, and very much 4 satellites inside the show. Everyone was doing their own, like, you know, Mary would do a Marg, and I would do my Rant. And so it was never like the band was breaking up. You know, I talked to Mary not that long ago. I mean, yeah, that was never an issue.
It wouldn't fit the Newfoundland mold either, would it?
No, not in that sense. I mean, like I say, it was our strength that we weren't a band, we weren't a comedy troupe. You know, bands and comedy troupes break up, but Saturday Night Live doesn't break up because they're not a comedy troupe. They're a group of individuals, and that's very much the way 22 Minutes was. You know, we used to do a sketch called the Quinlan Quince, and we loved to do it. But in fact, in the 8 years I was there, it was the only time all 4 of us ever appeared on screen together, because there was no mechanism for 4 of us to appear together in a sketch because it was too complicated to schedule. You couldn't do it. One person would be doing one thing, and the other one would have to go off and do the other thing. So that was the only time we were ever all together. It was a false construct that we were a troupe. We never were.
That's fair. I agree with that. Now, I do want to talk about Made in Canada, but because I know we've got a short amount of time to talk to you, we're not going to diminish the fact that Made in Canada was a great show and won awards. But another recent event, the tragic event that happened, was the passing of Gord Downey. You did your own kind of shout out to him. How important was that?
One of the great things about doing the Rant every week is, I think the perception is the Rant is often about politics. It's often about something that's bugging me, something I think is funny or absurd or ironic or stupid. But it's really just what's on my mind that week. And the week that Gord Downey passed away, I mean, he was on my mind a lot. And so it wasn't so much of Rant as it was a small story. And I wanted to tell the story because it's exactly the kind of story I would tell about him if someone asked about him. And I was of two minds because I didn't want to make it even remotely about me or even the fact that I knew him. And as I said in the Rant, I didn't know him that well. I mean, he did the music we use Tragically Hip music exclusively in Made in Canada, so it started out as a business arrangement. But as a result, you know, I became friendly with them, and most of the band has appeared on the show over the years, and I certainly appeared on the same bill with Gord a number of times. And my relationship with him is, like I say, was peripheral, but he had a real relationship with my father because one time Gord did ask me how to pronounce a word the way a Newfoundlander would, and I told him, but I said, if you want a second opinion, you know, talk to my dad. And he called Dad, unbeknownst to me. I didn't think he would. And they ended up talking for well over an hour. And when I said to Dad, oh my God, that was Gord Downey from the Tragically Hip, Dad said, oh, he never mentioned he was in a band. He just said he was Gord from Kingston. And I thought that spoke volumes about the character of the man, and it kind of summed up, you know, Gord to me. And my entire relationship with Gord really over the next 20 years, whereas if I did see him or we were at a gig or something, he would always say, how's your father? And I would tell him how Dad was, and then we'd have a little chat, and that was it.
In 2004, you started the Rick Mercer Report, because that's what we want you on for. So you're still doing that, right? You're still doing the Rick Mercer Report.
Still on it. I'm in the office now.
So what do you enjoy about the show? Because, I mean, 15 seasons, and you're soon going to clue it up. So what do you like about it?
You know, it worked. It worked. Like I said, opening my own restaurant, and I had the chance to create the show that I wanted to do. I basically, you know, Gerald Lunds and I, who I created the show with, we just basically wrote down all the things we thought that I was half decent at and could do, and then we put them all in one show, and it worked. And because I made that list to begin with, it contained things that I thought I could do and things that I liked doing. That's why it was the dream job. Like, there was really no aspect of the show that I didn't like. I mean, I love the travel. I love to be able to do silly sketches with, you know, great comic actors. I love to do every part of the show. And it's probably the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, that it worked and that people tuned in and watched it. And I've developed incredible friendships around the country. And the show itself, there's no turnover. Like, I look out through the door there, the people that are outside my office, in the office, I mean, they've been out there for 15 years. That's the way it is.
I watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I watched The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Do you kind of see your show as the Canadian version of that, or compare it to that?
No, I don't, actually, because the shows are so different. In fact, when I think of my show, I think of myself in the Arctic or myself in New Brunswick. And those shows that you just mentioned, well, they're on 4 nights a week or 5 nights a week, but they can't. The performers can't leave the studio. And when you can't leave the studio, the people you can talk to are people that are on a circuit. And I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but you talk to celebrities and you talk to authors and you talk to writers or whoever. People that are on the talk show circuit, politicians, whoever. But I'm really happiest talking to someone that no one's ever heard of before that happens to be a lobster fisherman in PEI. That's what I like to do. And that's the big difference.
You've been doing it for 15 years. Are you going to be sad to see it end? What's next for you?
Oh, I know I will. I've done this before, Made in Canada. I wrapped up at 65 episodes, but we had an option to do a few more. And talking to Americans, I love doing Talking to Americans, and the crew that I did it with, Jeff Dion and Pete Sutherland. I mean, we were like, a band of brothers. We had the best time of our lives doing that. And certainly after Talking to Americans aired, there was ample opportunity to do, I'm sure we could have agreed to do 3 more specials, but I just felt it wasn't the right thing to do. So I know that these things, I've been in this position before, but it's not easy. It's never easy. Like I say, I look out to the door there, and most of the people in this office have been here for 15 years.
In saying all that, what do you think is what's next? Because I know you just mentioned how sad you'd see, or when it's all over, but what do you see yourself doing in the future?
You know what? I don't know what the answer is. I know I'm not going to launch another show right away. Otherwise, I would just keep doing this show. I really don't know the answer. I'll be like so many Newfoundlanders. I'll be looking for work, I guess. I don't see myself retiring. I just don't know what it is I'll be doing.
The other thing I want to mention, I'm going to try to pitch this to you because I know you did an interview on the CBC, and I guess it was a Facebook comment that said that you should do your last show in St. John's. Now, I know that you kind of turned it down. You said, the desk, we don't want to move the desk. I travel with the show as it is, but why not? Why not have it in St. John's for your final let go?
To do something like that would purely be a vanity move on my part. It would be... the show doesn't move. I mean, if this show moved, if my desk moved around the country, then sure, that's where I would wrap it up. That would make sense. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, from a mercenary point of view, it would be expensive to do. And again, I think I would be mostly doing it for vanity reasons. And also, even though I travel all over the country, you know what? I moved to Toronto to do this show, and there's people on, who have been in the studio with me every step of the way. And I think it would be kind of odd to say, and for my last night, I'm taking the show and we're going somewhere else. You know what I mean? It's like, these are people who've, I've been in this building for 15 years. So, this is, I've always believed in dancing with the one that brung you. And they brung me, and I opened here and I'll close here.
Now, I like your answer. I'm not going to give you any disrespect for that answer, but I'm looking at it from a point of, if you did bring it home to St. John's and put it in the center that they have there, you could draw in a bit of money for a charity donation or something of that essence, or something that you'd remember for years later down the road.
Well, you know what? I know that I'm going to be spending a lot more time in St. John's, and I will certainly be performing there, I'm sure. But yeah, I can't even imagine the logistics of moving the studio. It's just a nightmare.
No, that's fair. I watched Conan and them do it, and I'm just thinking wow, they do it now every so often. But I was thinking wow, if Rick Mercer did that, that'd be kind of cool. But no, your answer is completely. I understand. That would be
a different show too, because my show. It doesn't have a huge studio component. The audience big part of their job is to be recorded for our laugh track, right? So we have a live laugh track, and the vast majority of the pieces. So it's not like I'm doing live interviews, and we don't have a band. You know what I mean? So it's you come to see a taping of my show. I'm up and down in 30 minutes. I'll do 15 minutes of entertaining the crowd in between, but it's a quick night. So in order picking it up and bringing it to St. John's, that might be a long way to go for a bag of chips.
Now, if you ever did do something like that, I would hope that you would have your band name called the Wonderful Grand Band for obvious reasons.
Well, they're not available, but maybe a band as good as them would be pretty good.
Lastly, what are some highlights of your career looking back at it all?
Boy, there's a whole bunch. There's some people that, I love the fact that I've had every member of Rush pretty much every member of the Hip. I've had Rick Hansen on the show. He was a childhood hero of mine. I did a project on him in school and became a little obsessed with him, and he turned out to be as awesome as he could have possibly been, and I got to throw him off a bridge. It was there's just been so many memories. It's a little embarrassing. Maybe I'll write a book. I don't know.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Rick Mercer for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, watch out, Rick, my boy. Tobin is trying to be the next great Newfie. Thanks for listening, and good night.